Welcome to the Tina Talks podcast, where time is not a healer, but we believe that we have the power to heal ourselves and take our mental wellbeing into our own hands. This podcast is a byproduct of Tina, the mental wellbeing marketplace, and a community platform at timeisnotahealer.com, providing you with the best products for your self-healing journey. Hit subscribe and follow us on socials if you want more support on your mental wellbeing journey. We're your hosts, Sophie and Kelsey. This episode is all about alternative healing methods and different options you've got to kind of like that traditional Western medicine style when it comes to helping yourself out with mental health. So I thought maybe we could start by talking a little bit about like what do we mean when we say alternative healing. Do you want me to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead, get started.
So when we talk about alternative healing, obviously when you're sick, we go naturally to the doctors, right? Like that's generally what we consider the normal route to go down if we are feeling unwell. Usually when we're struggling with our mental health, we might also go to the doctor and then they might maybe prescribe us some antidepressants or mood stabilizers, potentially therapy, CBT, etc. So there's a very standard route that you'd go down in like the Western medicine, very scientific and evidence-based approach of diagnosing and treating different mental well-being, mental health conditions. Um, However, there is a whole other world out there that so many people do try and explore. I've definitely explored it. Kelsey, I know, has had some experiences with it. And a lot of people do go down that route because sometimes they might have gone to the doctors, they might have tried the drugs, they might have gone to therapy, and none of those things are maybe working for them. Because as we've said many times before, you know, like what works for one person doesn't always work for the other. So sometimes these like Western medicine approaches, the scientific and evidence-based approaches to diagnosing and treating mental health conditions, don't always work for everybody. They can work and they're definitely something to try, but some people would rather venture outside of that box and try different things, particularly if they want to go down a more like natural route. So I guess that brings us on to like a next point of like, why would somebody venture down that route of going rather than traditional healing?
Yeah, I guess when I think of like traditional, if I think of inpatient psych when I was working on the unit, one of the biggest things that I would see. So just to give a really clear picture for you guys, inpatient psych versus outpatient. Outpatient is that therapy, you go into the clinic or you go into the therapist's office, but you go home. Inpatient is typically within a hospital. And the reason being that you're there is often because things are so severe that you're no longer able to take care of yourself. You might be a harm to yourself actively or harm to others kind of deal. And you need some quick stabilization. And one of the common things that we saw, for example, right, like psychiatric meds, although can be really helpful and are often can be potent, they do have their side effects. And there are things that people don't really also respond as well to. So for example, I took Zoloft, and this was outpatient. I wasn't in the hospital, but I took Zoloft for a very long time. And I was the picture perfect. Like I took Zoloft, I don't know if you didn't have these commercials, but we had the commercial. They were depression commercials for new depression meds. And it was like people walking around with these like rainy clouds hanging over them. And it was like they were really heavy and like drudged down. And then they take these meds and all of a sudden the cloud lifts off of them, the weight lifts off of them, and they feel much better. And this is like a really common, this had been in the 2000s, I think is what it was. I was literally the picture perfect of that. I had immediate response to the Zoloft, which for people who don't know is sertraline. That's the regular name. Zoloft is the brand name. I believe it's an SSRI, but so it helps with mood and everything. And like there are other people who they can take Zoloft and it does absolutely nothing for them. Their chemical reaction doesn't work in their body with whatever Zoloft is, and so they don't respond as well. Another example would be people who struggle with bipolar disorder often don't like being on their meds because it makes them feel completely numbed out and totally disconnected from who they are as a person. It's a very, very common side effect. And so that's why you see a lot of people who struggle with bipolar disorder often when they're feeling good, they're feeling well enough that they feel stable on the meds and they're like, well, I don't really want to be on this because it still isn't quite myself, and they get off of it and then they relapse either into having like a full major depressive episode or a full manic episode, and then it's that constant yin yang of like not feeling really settled. And I think, right, traditional, also accessibility. So think of like therapy. Therapy is not accessible to a lot of people in the Western world, in the like Eastern world, third world countries, all that. It's not super accessible. um so I think a combination of those reasons, side effects from pills, medicine just not working because it doesn't work with your biology, not having access to the resources or the services. And I think a lot of that tends to lead people to look for alternative ways to kind of work on their mental well-being and their health, or without like any added side effects. I would say that's probably the biggest driver. I would say the thing that holds people back the most from trying alternative healing is lack of education and awareness, and understanding that there is like a plethora of Eastern medicine out there that can really have beneficial effects, but it's just, it comes from this really weird weed plant like you have to boil down into a tea or something, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's a little bit different than what we're used to. And if we're already not feeling well and we're, to get out of our comfort zone like that can be a little bit hard. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest barriers to like taking that leap, but it can be really, really helpful. And I think a combination, right? A combination of Western and alternative healing can be a perfect match. It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting hearing you talk about antidepressants being advertised on commercials, because that would not happen in the UK. Like, that is absolutely
Oh,
not a
really?
thing that happens. No, not at all. Like, medicine isn't really commercialized in that way.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that it just shows you like the difference in industries from the US to the UK. And like, I know that in the US, obviously, like the medicine industry is like a very, very big revenue driving industry, right? So it's very
Yeah.
interesting to hear that that's like being so widely advertised. Like with mental health in the UK, it's almost like a little bit under the radar, where it's like, okay, I don't think I've ever seen a commercial actually on the TV for like a medicine. Definitely not for
Yeah.
mental health. Like maybe something like antihistamines for allergies or something
Yeah.
like that, or stopping colds, but definitely not for mental health. Like, it's still very much an under radar topic. And like with antidepressants, they do hand them out like candy. I won't lie. Like, if you go to the
Yeah.
doctors, you will happily get subscribed to antidepressants, like without probably many questions asked. In my personal experience, I've never
Yeah.
taken antidepressants personally, but I have asked for them before, and then I decided not to take them. And literally, they didn't ask me barely any questions, and they were like, here's the prescription, and then obviously you go
Mm,
and take it to the chemist and pay for it. But like, it's interesting like to see the differences. But I think you're right, like we don't get educated or taught about the Eastern side of medicine, and all of the different things that are out there in as an alternative to the medicines, the therapy, the CBT, like the things that are like so common and normal. And I think that's why, I really believe that's why so many people struggle, because they feel like they haven't got anywhere to go. Like, and
yeah.
maybe if like therapy, if they don't get along with therapy, like we did an episode on therapy a few weeks ago, and some people just don't get on with therapy, that's just not something that maybe that is right for them.
Or don't
And
have
maybe they don't have,
access.
or they don't have access, um, or they don't want to go on antidepressants or like medication, or they can't go on medication for whatever reason. I feel like people then they think that they then just have to sit and suck it up, right? Like, they can't do
Yeah.
anything else because they're not educated on like these, unless you go down a Google search hole and
Right.
find
Right.
all
I
of
mean,
the
we're not
options.
yeah, we're not educated on the standard Western ways of coping with mental health issues outside of therapy and meds, because there are a plethora of tools and
Yeah.
practices and habits that you could do. We're not educated on that. And then we're definitely not educated on the Eastern alternatives.
Mm-mm.
Um, what would you say was like your reason for trying alternative healing?
Um, I I can't remember exactly. I think I was obviously in therapy. This was like 2020, 2021,
Mhm.
maybe. I was in therapy. I started my new business. I was being expanded to lots of different things generally in life, like new people, like new situations, things that I hadn't experienced before. And I have always been very into like tarot and like psychic readings and stuff. Like I am very sensitive to energy. And I found this astrology lesson class thing in
Uh-huh.
London. And this is a whole different subject, but I found this class and basically I went to the studio and
Astrology is not alternative healing, just to let people know.
no, it's not. Sorry, that is not.
Yeah.
That's why I was going to say that's a whole different subject. But
Yeah.
I basically found this astrology class, and I'm very interested in astrology, and I thought, why not like
Same.
go down this route? So I went to this. I don't know how to describe this place. Like it's like a yoga studio, but
Okay.
very like witchy woo. um,
Okay.
so there was like everyone that like worked there basically called themselves witches, and like who am I to tell them that they're not? Like totally get it, like you do you. But it opened me up because they also, sorry, I'm getting to my point. They also had
Oh, you're okay.
like Reiki, sound healing, other things, other energy healing things that you could try out there. So the first class I went to was this astrology one. But then I was like looking on their website, trying to figure out like what else could I go and see. Because when I walked in there, I was like, I just felt so much peace as soon as I walked in. There was
Hmm.
a real calming energy in this place. So I was like, I want to go back there and experiment and try more things. Then I went to a Reiki class and it was like a group Reiki and a sound healing. So they're playing sound while somebody was coming down and doing Reiki on you. You were just laying there. And I saw so much color. And I was fascinated and I was like, what is going on here? Always been interested in these things. So that kind of led me down this rabbit hole of what else can I try? What else can I try? And then I realized how much better I felt and how much calmer I felt leaving that room after I'd done that Reiki session and the sound healing, that I was like, oh, is
Yeah.
there something here? Do I need to experiment in this a little bit more?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. How about you? How did you start trying new things?
Yeah. I guess for me, I have two very distinct memories. One that I didn't know would lead me down that route, and the other that like was explicit to it. So as a kid, there was this lady, people please go look her up. I think her name is called Waylani. She's Hawaiian, and like back in the like late 90s, early 2000s, she used to have her own TV show. I think you could buy like VHS tapes and stuff of it, but she would like air at like every time at 7 in the morning and every time at like 7 at night, like that. And it would be like a 30-minute whatever, and it's this Hawaiian chick in like straight up tracksuits, like full blown matching tracksuit. She had the lays and everything. And it was her doing yoga on top of a mountain in front of a beautiful sunset or sunrise. Like that
Wow.
was what her thing was. And as a kid, like I was really young, I would see this and I loved it. I thought it was really, really fascinating. So I always had this interest in yoga. And then, like in my early 20s and things, I felt really insecure. I tried doing a couple of classes, but as many people know, yoga can be really hard to break the barrier into. And so I dabbled a little bit. It wasn't until I was living in Asia that I actually like hardcore got into yoga and got really consistent with it for a very long time. But that was like, that's a side note. The thing that like made me actively seek out alternative healing, right, so I have a lot of trauma in my background. And when we have a lot of can like active trauma, certain things happen in the body. One of them being is that your cortisol levels get jacked up. And so you have really high production of cortisol. Now, my stress and trauma happened over like 20 years. Like it was consistently happening, even more so like from the day that I was born. There was a lot of turmoil and tumultuousness like happening in my family. And so I just had chronic high levels of cortisol over a long period of time. What happens when that happens is a series of things with your body. One of the things is I have really poor memory. There are chunks and periods of my life that I 100% have like it's blank. I don't remember it. People will say, "Hey, do you remember when we did X, Y, and Z?" And if they bring it up to me, it can trigger a memory, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, actually, I do remember that, and I remember the association of feelings." But I've got chunks of my life that are just completely like not there. My memory was fucked. And then my immune system, when you have high levels of cortisol over a period of time, your immune system gets affected. And I used to get sick all the time. And when I'm talking sick, I'm talking like I'd have tonsillitis once a year, I would have strep throat once a year, I would chronically be feeling ill and under the weather, like no, like so many issues. And I was living in Asia, so this had to have been like now 5 years ago. And I was getting sick of getting sick, right? I've been doing a lot of like working on myself and doing a lot of like cognitive behavioral journaling. I was getting into yoga. I was taking care of my diet. So I was like, you know, going through the process, but I was still getting sick all the time and I was miserable. And I started, right, I was in Indonesia, I was in Bali for a period of time, but then I was living in Vietnam and all this stuff. And I kept hearing from people in the community like, oh, breath work can help with X, Y, and Z. Breath work this, Wim Hof breathing. Wim Hof breathing was like got really big a couple of years ago. And so someone had one day I was just having a conversation with a group of people and she's like, yeah, I've been doing Wim Hof and like it really helps my immune system and like not getting sick. And I was like, all right, you're like the third or fourth person to bring this up to me. I'm going to try it. And so I got hardcore into Wim Hof breathing, which I don't know if any of you guys know, it comes from like, so if you've heard of like Tai Chi, right? Tai Chi is one of thousands of different practices under the overarching Qi Kong. And Qi Kong, all of that, it comes with different types of body movements and breath work. And one of the most ancient forms of breath work is called sumo. And sumo is basically where this guy, Wim Hof, he's a very famous, I don't know if he's Norwegian, Scandinavian, he's somewhere from that part of the world. And he basically took sumo breathing and he like commercialized it, but he like used it for himself and he used it to help heal certain things for himself, but he also like set a bunch of records. He was able to internally regulate his body temperature and like run a marathon in the Arctic or whatever. He's known for all of these things that he's done from a combination of um breathing and like cold water temperature stuff. And so he's commercialized it, which that's a whole nother topic for another thing. So please know that we're not promoting people to what's the word I'm looking for, to culturally appropriate. We're not trying to appropriate other people's cultures. Ideally, if you're learning these things, learn from someone who's from the area or from their history. But that's also another side note, because that's what a lot of I just had a conversation with someone about this, about like woo woo stuff and like what that really comes from. The practices are great and can be really helpful. But anyway, so I got into this breathing and it was a game changer. It literally changed my life. I stopped getting sick. I did it consistently for almost a full year, where I was doing it probably 4 to 5 times a week. I would occasionally add in cold showers and things like that, but I stopped getting sick. My mood was so much better. I lost a bunch of weight. Not that I was overweight, but I like trimmed out a little bit. Um, and I haven't stopped breathwork since. And so much so that I got a tattoo of it on my back. So
Yeah. I mean, I think breathwork's a really good one to start with, actually, because it's something that you do anyway, right? Like you
Mhm.
everyone breathes. We wouldn't be here if we
Yeah,
weren't. So I think that that's actually a really good natural starting place. Obviously, there are
yes,
like loads of other alternative healing methods to outside of Western medicine. So, but I'd say like breath work is probably one of the more practiced, easier ones to get into. You also
yeah,
mentioned Qi, which
yeah,
essentially is very associated with kind of like traditional Chinese medicine. Things
hmm,
like acupuncture, I'd say that that's quite a common thing that people tend to practice. Dipping
yeah,
into like herbal medicines to kind of balance your body or your energy, hormones out, that kind of thing. I know that you've done a lot of work on like obviously gut health and you've had like hormone specialists.
yeah,
That's pretty common, I'd say, like to try out. Like I think there's things that are common with this alternative healing and then things that aren't so common. And I'd say
yeah,
those two are probably very well known.
yeah,
As would maybe Ayurvedic, different like yoga, meditations, herbal remedies, things like changing in your diet, hypnotherapy, We can delve into these in
Mhm.
a bit more detail, but I just want to give a list of different things like naturopathy, so natural treatments such as change your diet, exercise, and herbal remedies. CBD and
Mhm.
cannabis is also utilized quite a lot. Ice baths and cold water therapy, you mentioned that a second ago. Humming, chanting, singing is a form of alternative therapy. Dancing and shamanic yoga. But then there's the things that maybe take a bit longer to get and understand and aren't quite as common, which maybe do fall into that woo-woo spiritual bracket, which I personally love. It would be maybe like more intense breath works, the sound baths, energy healing, so like reiki, theta, crystals, plant medicine, psychedelics, ecstatic dance. Obviously there's a long list there of different like alternative healing methods. I would say I've tried probably 90% of those.
Nice.
um,
What is shamanic yoga? Because that one's I'm not familiar with. I've never heard the
Shamanic
term
yoga
shamanic yoga.
is the one like it's mainly focuses on your hips, because it's obviously hips is where a lot of like
Door
emotion is
emotion.
stored. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of like rocking of the hips and opening up your hip flexors to try and release the emotions. Now, personally, for me, I like doing those exercises anyway because I've got very tight hips. But for me, I've never felt that particularly helps me release emotion in my experiences. However, I
Interesting.
have seen a lot of videos on YouTube, and maybe you've had that experience where it does release. I
Hmm.
don't know, like it works for everything. Different things work for different people, right? That one doesn't personally work on me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's so funny. Like, I've never heard the term shamanic yoga, but for some of you guys, like yoga does focus on different things based on the session or based on the instructor or whatever it is that you're doing. And I've had a couple of classes that where it was focused on releasing emotion from your hips. And like they always give a little caveat at the beginning, like, hey, so we're gonna be doing a little more hip work today. We're gonna be just trying to release tension there. Oftentimes there are some people who like it brings up a lot of emotion because that's where it's stored. I like started crying at the end of one class, but I was like quietly crying. I was like laying there and just like not that I was upset about anything, but from the release of energy. It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. What else have you tried on the list then? I'm interested to know, like, hear your experiences with
Yeah.
other alternative healing methods.
Yeah, so if you haven't picked up, Sophie is this is her bread and butter. She's really into a lot of this. And I'm also into like I'm always open to trying new things, but there are certain things that I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like for example, Reiki, not my thing. I don't see I'm a science-based person, so I don't see how that could really benefit or help you. Do I think that having a ritualistic practice that you do something like that, could that in and of itself be helpful? Can it have the placebo effect? 100%. Um, but so for me, I would say, so I've done true traditional Qigong, which I mentioned earlier, which is like Tai Chi for people who don't know. Like Qigong is like the mother of the entire grouping, like of everything. And it was fantastic. Never in my life before. So it's a combination of like very specific body movements with your breath, similar to yoga, but very different posture, stances, and movements. And it's all based on your internal systems, so like your organs and your different pathways. So the way you twist is like you're rinsing out your kidney, and then like the way you're breathing through it, stuff like that. And you do a combination of little breath work before and after. I will not lie, it not only re-energized me, but so this is I was in Vietnam when I was doing this, and afterwards I'm like riding my motorbike home and I'm like, oh my God, I am so horny. Like it like opened up my sexual energy. I was like,
Interesting.
ready for the world, what's going on? But like my energy in general was it just I felt so good and I felt so calm and grounded, but like high energy. I really enjoyed Qigong. Let's see, like I said, I've done the gut health and the hormone specialist. For those of you who don't know, 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. So there is a very strong connection. You know, when you get like butterflies because you see someone cute, or you get like sick to your stomach because you see it's like that's that whole description there. Um, I've not done Ayurvedic stuff, but I'm very interested in the diet thing. So one of the things for that, guys, like they do, certain times of the month for women, or based on where you're at with the stress levels, you're going to be having like warm foods versus cold foods, which is a very Eastern practice. And I guess I suppose I do it to some degree, but I don't do traditional Ayurvedic sort of stuff. I've never done hypnotherapy. The naturopathy is kind of like what I did combination with the gut health and hormone specialist. I love CBD. CBD does, especially if it's produced right, really helps my anxiety. It doesn't give you that high, really helps my anxiety. Depending on the type of cannabis, I can enjoy it or not. Most of the time, I do not enjoy smoking. I've dabbled with edibles and I err on the side of the indica because it's more of like that decompression. I'm just a crazy going mind all the time. I don't need to be more stimulated with sativa. I've done the cold water therapy. I've even done humming. I find that when I'm anxious or like when I'm out socially at a club, now I used to never do this. I hum. Granted, you're like dancing to music and stuff, but like I'm humming because sometimes I feel overstimulated. And when you hum or chant or sing, it stimulates your vagus nerve, which is connected. It's the root to all of your nervous system. Um, Dancing, ecstatic dance. I think ecstatic dance is fantastic. Going out there dancing sober is amazing. I've tried sound baths a number of times, and every time it eats me up. Like
Yeah, you said it triggers you, doesn't it?
it triggers me so bad. And so
Yeah.
to say what triggers me for those that are listening, like the vibrations, mind you, the first sound bath I ever did, a friend wanted to do this really fancy sound bath. So it was like in a pyramid. So pyramids amplify
Is it
sound
in
and
Pyramid
movement.
Tree?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was in a pyramid and she paid for like the extra package where we were on water beds. And then so you got the sound vibration, not only like echoed around you, but now through this waterbed up through your body. And then they had like a light thing happening. From the moment the first gong went off, my eyes teared up and I was crying. I didn't have any super intense, wacky experience. The sound back of it all was fine. But once I was up, I felt so ungrounded and unsteady. I literally had to excuse myself from the group and I went to behind the pyramid and I literally had to like hold on to a tree and like make fists with my feet in the grass and like I was just sobbing. I was crying. Not any particular reason, but it like uprooted all of this like stored energy, I guess. And then after that, I had one or two other experiences, but like more low key, like just, where you've got the bowls on the floor and you're laying on the floor with your head near the bowl. And that also it like spiked my anxiety for 2 days where I was like crying a whole lot. It was very uncomfortable for me. And it didn't teach me anything. It didn't like it didn't there wasn't a lesson that I was trying to learn or anything like that. It just really uprooted my grounding energy. Go ahead.
I think that's the point. It's not meant to. It's meant to make you release. The point of sound healings is all about like it's all done on vibrations, right? And we are all a
Yeah,
vibration. If
right.
so, the point is that when you the frequencies of each bowl or instrument that they're using is meant to trigger a certain emotion in
Right.
you that is supposed to be released. So that is probably why it feels so uncomfortable because whatever frequency that bowl maybe have been set at is triggering a certain emotion in you that's probably buried quite deep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am like I think through my things. I do try being that I come from the field. So get myself to like feel my way through the stuff I need to
Yeah.
feel. So I don't feel like I'm burying anything, right? Like
No.
I go through the process. My mom passed last year of like, I need, like, I'll write a letter to her. Like, I'll have my moments where I
Oh,
cry
for
and I'm
sure.
sad. I talk to my boyfriend about it. So I do let my stuff out. I'm sure there are years and years of buried emotion that like I was not in a safe place to experience when I was younger. That like now in safety, I could probably bring about with sound baths, but I guess to each his own, right? I think so. Sound
Yeah.
baths can be really helpful for a lot of people because I, like you, I believe in like the sound vibration and the vibrations of what we're feeling in our body, and I think it can be helpful at times. I don't know. It's messed me up a couple of times. I don't know if I'll be
Yeah.
going back anytime soon.
I know it's interesting because like I think I know a lot of people that say have the same experience as you. And Pyramids of Chi, for anyone that doesn't know, is in Bali, and we met in Bali. We both lived
Yeah.
that kind of Bali lifestyle, and Pyramids of Chi is a very unique place. I don't know if there's anywhere else like it where it's gone.
Have you ever talked to the owner?
No, no, I've never talked to Sienna.
Wild story. He claims him and his partner, they retired. He claims that he had a dream of him building this pyramid, and it was a reoccurring dream that came over and over again. And then it like came to him, and that he just felt the need to have to go and build this pyramid in Indonesia. And he spent their entire retirement fund on building these pyramids, and now it's like a prolific business.
Oh my God,
He's
it's
a little
huge.
hippie
It's
dippy,
like,
my choice.
I mean, I don't doubt that. Like, I fully believe that story. But like, it's interesting because yeah, it's a huge business now, right? Like, if people go to Bali just to experience pyramids of chi, and the reasons that that's so unique in experience is because of the way that the pyramid is structured. The vibrations have, I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's like bouncing off of every single.
They amplify sound. Pyramids
Exactly,
amplify
it's
sound.
amplifying sound.
Hmm.
Exactly. So that's probably why it's extra intense in that environment. But yeah, like I said, I do have other friends that have that same
Yeah.
experience and they cannot do sound bars. But I don't believe that they're trying to teach you anything. I think it's literally just like a release, like when you need
A
a
release.
release. Maybe you
Yeah.
don't need it consciously, but like somewhere in there, it's like, let's get something out. Even if you don't need to cry, it's like, let's just bring out anyway.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, I have the complete opposite effect when I do sound healing. It's actually one of my favorite things to do because I
It
just
grounds
find it so
you.
relaxing. It calms me down, as does Reiki. And that's how I obviously then first got into some of these experiences, and I would
Yeah.
consider myself as quite a spiritual person. I do believe in quite a lot of these like energy practices and things like that because I have had first-hand experiences with them that I can't
Mhm.
explain, like
Yeah.
if I go
No, go
on.
ahead.
Sometimes I go into things with a logical head. I think I'm quite a logical person, but I also have this real spiritual woo-woo side to me. And I go
Yeah.
into some of these things and I'm like, surely this isn't going to do what it tells me it's going to do. But then I have an
Yeah.
experience and I'm like, oh wow, okay. So I think it doesn't really matter like whether you're spiritual or not. If
Right.
whatever resonates with you, whatever helps you, whatever makes you feel better, do it. Like, why not?
Yeah. I agree with that. I was going to say, I think it's important. And so I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah.
What, like, right? Because alternative healing methods is not synonymous with spirituality. They do not
No.
mean the same thing. I guess, what does being spiritual mean to you that makes you consider sometimes that some of those methods are like a spiritual practice?
I would say that if they trigger some kind of feeling of, how do I put this without sounding absolutely wild? Some kind of
No judgment
feeling.
here.
I would say if they trigger something in you that makes you believe that there is a greater power outside of like the 3D world that you're experiencing, you're living right now,
Yeah.
that is where I would go down the route that it is a bit more spiritual. So things like energy healing, sound baths, even breath work in some cases, plant medicine, all of those things bring up another experience of
Yeah.
the one that you're living in this three-dimensional world, right? I don't know how
Yeah.
else to explain it.
Yeah.
But some of these things, they don't need to be spiritual. You might not have a spiritual experience attached to that. You might just feel more at peace, more calming, more like
Right.
whatever. It might just relieve your anxiety. You might not have that spiritual experience. I personally have associated with those things I've just mentioned, have had more spiritual experiences associated with those. And some people do, some people don't. Some people feel energy, some people don't. Some people believe, some people don't. You have to be open minded
Yeah.
to it for it to be an experience for you. But then there are some of those alternative healings that have nothing to do with that. Like I would say, like,
Yeah.
you know, the dancing, for example, that's you just releasing your energy. You're just getting that
Right.
out. Yoga, yeah, some people will experience more like spiritual sides of yoga because maybe they go into like deep meditations alongside their yoga, that kind of thing. Again, that then can draw into like a more spiritual experience. But things like acupuncture, herbal medicines, probably not so spiritual. You could potentially experience something a bit more spiritual with that from like ice baths, I'd say, because you're normally in like you're normally following like a breathing pattern. If you're doing like an ice bath
Yeah.
experience, you're
Yeah.
probably experiencing some kind of breath, in which case you're really connecting to something within you. So yeah, I don't know.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because like you're talking about it, and I think about like with Wim Hof breathing or other styles of breathing. Ooh, I've gotten high. Like I felt that euphoria, but I
Yeah.
don't associate it like in a spiritual way. I think
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the description that you gave was a very spot on description. When I think about spirituality, right? Like I was raised Catholic. I no longer really believe in organized religion, but I do consider myself a spiritual person. I believe that there, if you want to call it Mother Earth, whatever, there's a lot of energy that floats around that we exchange and we interact off of and all that stuff. So you can start to get into some like physics on that end. And so that's where my spirituality comes from. Do I necessarily believe it's like a higher power in the sky? Not really. But when I look at alternative healing methods, for me, they're alternative because they potentially haven't been studied to be proven scientifically, although they've been practiced for thousands of years, and you can see the benefits of the practice just from like reading the history on it or even practicing it yourself. And so like that's for me where the difference is. And like I'll do things like the qigong or the breathing, the yoga, the ice baths, and I've had euphoric experiences where I'm like, whoa, like I feel fantastic. This is like a whole, and I feel connected to everything, right? Like you have that connection. I still don't necessarily think that, to me, that I don't consider it spiritual for me. Because I'm not like kind of going to that route of that thinking. But when it's something alternative that I'm like for example, Reiki, where I'm like, yes, right, there's energy. You can pass energy from you to another person, whether it's verbally, physically, emotionally. Vibes, baby. Vibes exist for a reason. I just haven't had the experience of like, right, it's about being open to it. Like, are you physically open to that experience and allowing that energy to affect you? Maybe I'm not open to it in that way, but I mean, I've had other experiences that have been really good, but I definitely have like a separation of the two, if that makes sense.
For sure, for sure. And I think a lot of people would want to try these things and not have any
Yeah.
spiritual experience happening. Like, even
Yeah.
the thing is, you don't need a spiritual experience to try these things. It doesn't have to be related. I'm just talking from my personal experience of like, this is what's
Yeah.
happened for me. Like, I could talk about it for hours, to be honest. But like,
I think we have
they,
before.
I personally believe they are linked, because I would say that
Hmm.
the gateway to having some of these experiences, the spiritual experiences, are these practices. Like, and if you, like you just said, if you are open to it, it potentially could happen to you. Like, you never know. Like, you have, but you
Yeah.
can't. If you go into it and be like, I don't believe in this, but I'm going to try anyway. Like, you're just doing it for the plot. You know, like, you're probably not going to have the spiritual experience attached to it, but it could help you in another way, like I said earlier. So I think go into any of these things with an open mind and see what
Hmm.
happens, see what works for you. I didn't know Reiki was going to work for me when I first tried Reiki, and then I was like, wow, what is this magic? And then carried on doing it, and I'm actually trained to be a Reiki practitioner, so like I can
Yeah.
give and receive Reiki. I personally do believe in it. I've also got some pretty wild stories that I could tell around Reiki, but that's for another
Yeah.
that's for another day.
Maybe
um
I shouldn't judge Reiki because I've never tried it, but like it's just been one of the few that it hasn't clicked for me.
Yeah,
Um,
again, doesn't nothing, and it's the same. Like, as even if we were talking about the Western medicine, some things don't click, right? Like, some people don't get on at all with antidepressants. Some people don't get on at all with
yeah.
therapy. It's the exact same with this. Like, all of
Yeah.
these things are just things you could try. Go down a little rabbit hole, explore some of them. Like, you never know.
Yeah. You know what's funny though? I will say, being that I've had a mix of both Western and alternative healing, I will say it is the alternative healing consistent practices, the alternative healing habits that I have developed that have been probably the biggest game changer into me staying resilient against life's BS, right? Like
Yeah,
how I manage myself on a daily basis and how I deal with stress that comes my way, or how I just like cope on an everyday basis. It has all been from habits and alternative healing methods. Because I did get off
amazing.
of my antidepressant after 4 years. And it's not like I'm in therapy all the time. I'm not practicing CBT all the time, but I do pull some of those methods, but a lot of these other methods that I use consistently to really help manage my anxiety and my mood. And
Yeah,
I think it's
I
about finding what works for you.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say like the main things that have worked for me out of the things that we've been talking about, like to really change me on a day-to-day level, one
Yeah.
would be naturopathy, so taking supplements. Like I really struggle with what's it called? Like what's it called when you struggle with before your period? Like PMDD, is it
Oh,
called that?
PMS.
Postmenstrual, yeah,
Yeah,
PMS.
it, it,
So I
yeah.
really struggle with like quite an extreme version of that about a week before my period where I'm literally like the world is about to end. So I started taking supplements. I started taking saffron and ashwagandha, and both of them, like I can immediately notice a difference as soon as I've taken those. And again, it could be a placebo effect, I don't know, but it does genuinely
Yeah.
feel like something has switched in my brain to change my mood in whatever way that from not taking those supplements, I can very clearly see the
See a
difference.
difference.
And
Yeah.
they're very accessible for people to go out. They are expensive, but like they are accessible on like the high street, on websites for you to go out and purchase. We'll probably be selling some through Tina as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that has completely changed my life and been so much more impactful than any of the Western things that I have tried has been a form of hypnotherapy. I haven't done like traditional hypnotherapy, but I've done a lot of subconscious work where it's like you drop yourself into a theta state and you are in your kind of subconscious and you're reprogramming thoughts from your
Hmm.
subconscious, not from a conscious mind. And
Hmm.
that has been completely life changing for me, honestly. Like that has been
Yeah.
what has fully transformed my mental health, from like having waking up with anxiety every day to being able to understand and manage it, because I've
Yeah.
really gotten to the bottom of the root cause and tried to reprogram it from a subconscious level rather than a conscious level. And that has really worked for me. And the other thing that worked for me to, I wouldn't do this every day, but I would do it if I was in like I would try and do this every day if I was in the right location to do it every day. But ice
Yeah.
baths, I think if you are a person that doesn't live presently and is really always thinking about the future or the past, go and get yourself in a freezing cold ice bath and stay in there for between 3 and 5 minutes, because I promise you, you have no time or like energy to be thinking about the future or the past. That is bringing you right back to the present moment, because all you're
Yeah.
focused on is surviving in that freezing cold water. So
Yep.
you have to be present on your breath and things like that. So they would be my three that I would personally really suggest anybody to go and try, because I found the
Hmm.
most success with them. The energy stuff is a completely separate thing, I think, like, and that, like we say, is each to their own of like what someone's
Yeah.
preference is. But for things that are like easily accessible to not easily accessible to everybody, but like you can
Yeah.
probably find in cities and towns, those would be the three things that I would potentially suggest.
Yeah. All right. So we're
Would
only
you have
allowed to pick three.
yeah.
Okay, so I guess if I were to pick my top three, number one would for sure be breathing. So it's something that I still do consistently every day, whether you do intensive breathing like Wim Hof or you switch to something like coherent or square breathing, a little more gentle, but you can continue to practice. And like this is a bare minimum of 5 minutes a day. Huge game changer in resetting my nervous system consistently, and it works really well. So the breath work, I would say yoga, because yoga, this is the part that everyone hates about yoga is like holding the poses. You're like, ah, I don't want to, it's too hard. I don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. But that's what yoga is about. It's about learning how to hold the pose, breathe through it, stay in the present moment, to stop thinking about the past, stop thinking about the future, and like be able to be mentally resilient in that moment through those poses and through that flow. So I would say breath work, the yoga. Um, it has been a game changer for me is the naturopathy, which has come from the gut and health, the gut and hormone specialist that I work with, which is so that I also take supplements like probiotics, and I do Vitex berry, which is good for your hormones and stuff like that. And then occasionally like with CBD. So those supplements are really, really helpful. And I know we're only allowed three, but I'm going to add the last one because it has been a standing thing my entire life, dancing. And not like I need to be doing some professional ballet dancing or something. Like I'm talking about getting down by myself in my room always a really good way to like shake off energy. And I know like that's a combination of like there's shaking and all these other kind of methods, but dancing has always been a game changer. Whether I'm going out with friends, I just went to a 4-day festival and I danced my butt off and I feel great. Like it's just another release of energy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of forgot about dancing, if I'm honest, like because I used to dance as a kid. I loved dancing, like really loved dancing. And then for whatever reason, and even into my early 20s, I was like a proper raver when I was like
Oh yeah.
early 20s. Like I'd go out every weekend, like
I was raving last week.
yeah, like festivals. I literally there was one somewhere it's like 8 festivals, and I loved nothing more than like a festival and like dancing my ass off
Yeah.
at those festivals. But for some reason, between the age of like 23 and my age now, 32, I've lost that. And I haven't been doing it for whatever reason. I don't know why. Maybe like my living circumstances just haven't really like necessarily
Yeah.
allowed for it or whatever. Also, I cancelled my Spotify subscription. So like I haven't got the playlists. So
Ah,
I think like they're both things factoring in. But I agree. Like I told you in another episode that I went to an ecstatic dance recently. And before
yeah.
I went to systematic dance, I was very like skeptical of it. I was like, even for me, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I went and it
It
was
was,
like the best experience ever. Like I had
yeah.
so much fun and I really felt so like you like that feeling of euphoria at the end
Yep.
where I was like, wow, like I just feel like I've released so much energy here. I feel really good about myself right now and I really feel happy about this situation. I was very grateful for the situation. So I would
Yeah.
agree, like dancing is a really great release.
Solid key. You can do that sober. And if you need to, you could do it with a little aid, but we don't recommend that. But you could do it. It's a thing that you can do at home, out with friends. It's easy and accessible. So I love it. You know what it
Yeah.
is, Sophie? It is festival season. It is summer. So maybe you just need to get yourself back out there dancing just a little bit.
Maybe. I mean, there is shitloads of festivals in Barcelona this summer, which is where I am at the moment.
Yeah.
So possible, could
Yeah.
be. Um, so I guess
So
like
you're
fine, just to close, let's maybe recommend some places for like people to try and start getting into some of these things. Like,
sure.
are they accessible for everybody? What should people look out for? I would say one thing for me, like I would say, would be to maybe if you have never had any experience with like, especially if you want to go down the route of like some of the more spiritual ones that we've spoken about, or like breath work, ice baths, that kind of thing. A really good thing to look for would be retreats because
Yeah.
wellness retreats generally tend to incorporate quite a few of those. They will most likely incorporate yoga, meditation, breath work, potentially sound baths, maybe a bit of reiki, probably an ecstatic dance of some format. Like quite a lot of these things would be included in a retreat. And don't get me wrong, I know retreats are often quite expensive, so I'm not saying that's accessible to everybody. But if you have the means and it is something that you're interested in trying out, that would be a really great way to try quite a lot of these things at once and see what sticks with you, and then you can take it
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. I think the local option of that would be looking for your local gym or yoga studio because nowadays, since they are more popular methods like ice baths and saunas, and like sometimes they do a combination of breath work, like in your local area, there'll be people who are doing a breath work workshop, and there's a combination with ice baths or whatever. You can start to kind of get a feel local yoga wise. I'll let people know. And just like you have to try out a therapist a couple of times before you commit or move on to the next one, it's the same with gyms and yoga instructors. I find, right? Like I was so spoiled in Vietnam. Ugh, Kimchi, that was my instructor's name. She was amazing. I loved her and I miss her every day. I still haven't quite found a replacement for that. So I think just know you kind of got to try some places out to see locally, like what kind of classes do they have? Do they have additional workshops and things? And then outside of that, you can always get started on your own at home, checking out YouTube, looking on Instagram. Um, I think you made note that ads will pick up what you're putting down. So whatever you're searching, you'll start to get ads for different courses and things like that. So you could do an online course that's a cheaper version of a retreat and still feel like you have a community that you can like talk to and engage with about and like have support learning how to do some of these techniques. So I think we kind of covered all the bases from like local,
Yeah.
online, and abroad.
Yeah, I do find normally if you're in a bigger city, because I've traveled a lot, right? And I seek these things out. This is my realm.
Yeah.
Like you said at the beginning, like I actively seek out quite a lot of these things. It's actually, as a nomad, and I live my life like on the road and exploring new places a lot. Like I genuinely tend to veer towards the places that have more of these things on offer. And I will say that they are really difficult to find in small towns, in like more Western countries. However, you will find them in certain big cities, depending on where you live. And there are hubs, known hubs for this kind of activities throughout the world as well. So, like places that we've both kind of lived, like Bali, Thailand, Costa Rica, Portugal, if you're in Europe, they are generally, even Barcelona actually, they are generally hubs for where those people that are interested in some of these things generally hang out, and because you can find more of it and those people are more drawn to, I don't know why, there's probably some kind of energy around these places, but sucked towards these places, and that's generally where you'll find more of it. So what I will say is, if you can't find it in your local area, maybe look at your local city that's like a little bit like closer to you, because you're more likely to find options probably there.
Nice. Yeah. No, I think that's a great little last segue. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I
All good?
think the
Well,
only thing I'd say is just be open-minded. Like, see
yeah.
what works for you. Don't give anything. If you really are struggling with your mental health, there is nothing lost by trying some of these things. You never know what is actually going to work for you. So, like, I think if you are really struggling and you have tried therapy, you've tried the antidepressants, you've tried anything that traditional Western medicine can give you and offer you, take a stab in the dark, right? Like there is nothing that you're going to
Yeah.
lose, only hopefully to gain.
Yeah. No, that's beautifully said. The only thing I'll add off of that is that you guys got to remember the self-healing journey is a journey. It's not like you find one thing and boom, it makes everything better. It's about building a consistency in like habits and routines and lifestyle to better take care of you and what you need on your mental health journey. So, with that said, thanks for listening to our episode today. If this resonated with you, be sure to give us a like. We would love to hear your feedback in the comments about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on socials, and join the community at timeisnotahealer.com. All the details can be found in the episode description below. And remember, you hold the power to heal. Until next time, you've got this.